Welcome to High Cheese. It's Friday, September 20th, 2024. And there was a second assassination attempt on Donald Trump this past week. And I'll get into the detail a little later, but just looking at the response from the media, the Democrats, I'm looking at a missed opportunity by the Democrats and the media to unify this country. Come to the realization that Donald Trump has been demonized by the media and the Democrat Party to the point where people are trying to kill him. All you hear from the mouths of the mainstream media, Kamala Harris, Democrats, demonizing Donald Trump. And what do you expect is going to happen? Now, part of the Democrat base are mentally ill people. People just filled with hate, which causes them essentially to become mentally ill. And they are ginning up these people because they think they can get votes from them. And again, that's what happens when the only desire is power and nothing else. And you would think that after seeing all this, the media and the Democrats would come out and say, hey, let's tone this rhetoric down against Donald Trump. But they don't want that because it's all about emotion. It's all about the hatred. That's the only thing they got. I mean, the perfect example of projection. Remember the Democrat Party convention? All they talked about was joy. We're the party of joy. No, you're the party of hate. You hate Donald Trump and you hate most of this country. The Democrat Party is preying on Americans that hate themselves, that are mentally ill, to come out and vote for hate. And their water boys, the mainstream media, they're all on board with this. Now let's go to a clip, and this is with Lester Holt. He's the anchor for the NBC Nightly News. And he's talking about the second assassination attempt. But when you hear this clip, notice how he pivots right toward Donald Trump. Talking about Donald Trump being divisive. Let's go to this clip and then we'll come back and discuss.
Today's apparent assassination attempt comes amid increasingly fierce rhetoric on the campaign trail itself. Mr. Trump, his running mate J.D. Vance continue to make baseless claims about Haitian immigrants in Ohio.
So there's a second assassination attempt on Donald Trump. And this guy wants to talk about Donald Trump's baseless claims, which may or may not be true. But they want to equate this with his assassination attempt. And in doing so, they're normalizing assassinating Donald Trump. This is what they're doing. No big deal. Donald Trump, somebody shot Donald Trump. But he said something bad. And this is why the mainstream media is dangerous. Because they're normalizing the death of Donald Trump. Now, I don't think it's going to happen. There may be more assassination attempts, but I firmly believe he's got the hand of God on him, protecting him. And this is something that the Democrats and the mainstream media just can't fathom. But this is what they're doing. You've got Hillary Clinton out there saying he's a threat to democracy. You've got a Democrat congressman, last name's Goldman, saying that Donald Trump has to be eliminated. And you're not telling me the minions that are listening to these people are going to try to kill Donald Trump? But they're trying to normalize the death of Donald Trump. And this is evil. This is how the communists work. Kill your enemy. What did Fidel Castro do when he took over? He killed his enemies. Executed them. Drove out good, hard-working Cubans and said, look, you can leave the country or I'm going to kill you. Look at the Bolshevik Revolution. Kill your enemy. Look at the Chinese Revolution. Kill your enemy. And this is what they're pushing. So with that said, let's go to another clip. It's with Senator Tommy Tuberville. And he's saying, look, guys, just tone it down. Tone the rhetoric down. Because you're going to get Donald Trump hurt. So let's go to this clip and then we'll come back and discuss.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. Pretty serious time. This administration's created a bunch of firsts for this country. Over 10 million illegals. Violent crime, 37%. Rape, 42%. Robbery, up 63%. Fentanyl everywhere. Gas prices, record highs for a long length of time. Our military is being destroyed from within. Our three-letter agencies are having huge problems. They're being weaponized. The world's in absolute chaos. This administration is setting records of incompetency. Congratulations, if that's what they're trying to do, because they've been able to accomplish that. And now, after multiple assassination attempts, they can't even give the former president and possibly future president security he and his family needs. It's absolutely ridiculous. This isn't surprising. We have a huge mental health problem in this country. But when you hear on TV and radio and on social media about this guy's a Hitler, this guy's a fascist, he's a threat to democracy, what do you expect? All you have to do is look at some of these tweets I have here from some of our so-called politicians. And then you got people like Hillary Clinton, George Clooney, Joy Reid, Robert De Niro, wannabe politicians, and it's time for them to shut up, because somebody is going to get killed other than the fireman that got killed already in Pennsylvania. Mentally ill people hear this violent, dangerous rhetoric, and we're going to have a copycat. It's coming. And it's just unfortunate. Somebody's going to get killed.
And Tuberville's not exaggerating. You should see some of the social media comments. They're glad it's happened. They call MAGA people flies. Now, in one event, if you ever watch C-SPAN in the early mornings has these talk shows where regular people can call in and just voice their opinion. And one of the people that called in said, yeah, this was a good idea. Killing Trump is a good idea. Now, they cut the guy off before he could finish his comment, but this is what's out there. And the Democrats and the media are ginning up this hate. Now, if there's any Democrats, any sane Democrats, you have to reject this. And you reject this by unifying this country and voting for Donald Trump. Not for hate, but for Donald Trump. Because you don't want people in charge full of hate. Let's take a look at a recent poll by Rasmussen. And this is shocking. It says here more than 1 in 4 Democrats, 28% of those polled, believe America would be better off if former President Donald Trump had been assassinated. And this is from the Gateway Pundit. And it quotes Scott Rasmussen, president of RMG Research. He said, it's hard to imagine a greater threat to democracy than expressing a desire to have your political opponents murdered. So for those sane Democrats, do you want to be associated with this? This is the mindset of your party. And again, vote for Donald Trump. He'll unify this country. So let me give you an update on the first assassination attempt in Butler, PA. And here's what we know. The Secret Service and the FBI is stonewalling. They know nothing right now because they are only interested in protecting their own agencies. Not the American people. This is all about protecting their own agencies. And they're doing it. Now, this has left members of Congress to do their own investigation. Now, Senator Josh Hawley released this week his investigation to date. And there's 2 highlights that I just wanted to point out. One of the highlights of his investigation shows us that the person that was in charge of the Butler site was incompetent. He or she was a known incompetent person that was elevated to his or her position in spite of failing certain requirements to be where he or she is. The second thing that, and I mentioned this before, is that there were more Homeland Security people protecting Donald Trump than Secret Service agents. Apparently, in a nutshell, these Homeland Security employees were deputized by Secret Service, figuratively I'm speaking, to protect Donald Trump. Is that adequate? And you also have the bureaucracy in Washington, including the President of the United States, denying the protection that Donald Trump needs. Their position is, oh, he's only going to get the protection that a normal former president would get. Well, Donald Trump is a special case. People are trying to kill him. There's a strong, dark force against Donald Trump, and he needs that extra protection. So in the bureaucratic mindset, oh, he's only going to get what everybody else gets. The amoral bureaucracy, the amoral president that we have. He's only going to get what everybody else gets, not what he needs. Now, pivoting over to the golf course assassin, this guy, Ruth, how was he able to just stay undetected for 12 hours on the outskirts of that golf course? And why wasn't a Secret Service agent walking up and down that area which abuts a public roadway before Donald Trump teed off? Now, this gentleman, Ruth, spent a lot of time in Ukraine. He was trying to get Afghani soldiers to fight in Ukraine against Russia. Spent a lot of time out there. Apparently, the consulate in Kiev are very familiar with him. What's that all about? Also, how did he get an AK-47? Here's a convicted felon. He had previous run-ins with the law. How was he able to get an AK-47? And one of my listeners brought up a good point. He goes, wait a second. This guy spent all his time traveling around the world, traveling here, traveling. Who was paying his way? Now, apparently he was a roofer at some point in his life, or he owned a roofing company. That was years ago. Who was paying his way? Let's take a look at his bank accounts. Let's take a look at debit cards. So there's a lot of questions here. And Donald Trump is funny. He's a guy trying to kill him. And he was his only disappointment was that he wasn't able to finish a birdie putt. And I wish they let him finish it. Birdies are very hard to get. But that's where we are right now. So we shall see.
Another humiliating gaffe that's drawing mockery. Kamala Harris said freedom of speech is a privilege, not a right.
He has lost his privileges and it should be taken down. And the bottom line is that you can't say that you have one rule for Facebook and you have a different rule for Twitter. They are directly speaking to millions and millions of people without any level of oversight or regulation. And that has to stop.
This Twitter user slammed the VP, saying Kamala Harris wrongly says freedom of speech is a privilege when it's actually a right clearly defined in the First Amendment. The fact Kamala doesn't know this says everything.
So Kamala Harris thinks that free speech is the equivalent of getting a driver's license. Free speech is a privilege, just like a driver's license is a privilege. Kamala, it's much more than that. We've got a constitution which protects free speech. And that was from Sky News Australia. And listen, this is what you're going to get with Kamala and Tim. These people are Marxists. Marxists kill their enemy. Marxists suppress free speech. And this is what they're pushing. And speaking of Tim, let's go to a clip with Tim to see what he feels about free speech.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
So, Tim, what is misinformation? Who's going to determine misinformation? If it was up to you, it was the government. It would be the government, those in power, that would determine what misinformation is. And as we know from the Twitter files, and again, thank goodness that Elon Musk bought Twitter. Because of that, we have found that the government worked hand in hand with Twitter to suppress free speech, to suppress speech that contradicted what the government said. But this is what they want. They want to be the arbiter of everything in your life. What you can say, who you vote for. Now, one of my listeners made an interesting point. He said that if Elon Musk did not buy Twitter, it would make Donald Trump's reelection that much more difficult. When you see the millions of Americans that are talking about things on social media in support of Donald Trump, in support of free speech, in support of the truth, if Elon Musk did not buy Twitter and let the American people voice their opinions, it would be very difficult for Donald Trump to win. And there's some truth to this. But this is what you're going to get with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And don't you find it really ironic that Tim Walz is talking about hate speech? You don't have a right to hate speech. Meanwhile, they're out there demonizing Donald Trump, calling him a threat to democracy, calling him a fascist. And that's not hate speech, particularly when they're ginning up people to the point where they're trying to kill Donald Trump. But that's okay. As long as we say it, it's okay. And that's the kind of America that they want. Do as I say, not as I do. So the Teamsters came out this week and they decided they were not going to endorse Kamala Harris. And this was the first time in decades that the Teamsters union has not endorsed the Democratic nominee. Now, one interesting thing we have to take a look at is that the rank and file of the Teamsters, they conducted their own poll. Never before have the rank and file of the Teamsters union went to the rank and file and said, who do you want? For years and years and years, it's always been the higher-ups that determined who they were going to endorse. And many times it was not in the interest of the rank and file. It was in the interest of those at the top of the unions. So the Teamsters rank and file came back and they did their own poll on their 1.3 million members. And the results are astonishing. And I'm reading from the summary of the poll. Following the Republican National Convention and Biden's campaign exit, the Teamsters commissioned a national electronic poll of its 1.3 million members, overseen by an independent third party, during a voting window from July 24th to September 15th. Rank and file Teamsters voted 59.6% to endorse Donald J. Trump, compared to 34% for Harris. And that's astounding. So for the first time that I can remember, the rank and file members of unions are saying, no, you're going to listen to us, leadership. We're not going to listen to you. And the leadership of the Teamsters, they saw this coming and they knew they couldn't endorse Kamala Harris. So they opted not to endorse anyone. But this is a win for Donald Trump, and this is a win for the unions in this country. You know what? And one thing people have to remember, you do not have a good economy without a middle class. And I'm talking about upper middle class to lower middle class. It's not a good economy. Because if you only have the extremely wealthy and the extremely poor, that's just a third world economy. But this is what we're fighting right now, because the people in power right now, people in the Democrat Party, want this third world type of economy. They want an economy that mimics China, where it's communist, where it's top heavy, where the dictates come from a centralized government. And we'll give you some kind of semblance of capitalism here and there. That's what they want. But what happens is you just have the very rich and very poor. And that's not a good economy. In spite of the people that you see on Wall Street saying. Because all they're saying is we want policies that make the stock market go up, whether it makes sense or not. And we're seeing this right now. We've had a disconnect in the stock market from Main Street for decades. And they've become so arrogant. There was some economist, I forgot his name, he said that the financial market is the economy. How arrogant is that? And this leads to just top-down dictates, top-down government. And that's not healthy. And the other reason they don't like a big middle class is that there are more of us than them. But this is good news for Donald Trump. So we shall see. So the Fed did its part this week in trying to help Kamala Harris. The Fed came in and reduced interest rates by 50 basis points. Now, most on Wall Street were expecting a 25 basis point cut. But the Fed came in and said, no, we're going to give 50. They were trying to give the stock market a sugar high here, right before the election. And this Fed meeting is the last meeting before the election. They don't have an October meeting. So the Fed did its job. They can't tell me that the Fed is not political. And by the way, this was the first non-unanimous decision to reduce interest rates, I think, since 2005. One of the Fed governors said, no, he's not on board with a 50 basis point rate cut. And you wonder why he even cut rates, because everything you hear from Wall Street, from the Fed, is that the economy's doing well. So why are you cutting interest rates? All he's doing is trying to give the stock market a sugar high going into the election. And for those people that think that this is going to have an effect on mortgage rates, you know, these short-term rates have very little effect on the 10-year bond. Now, mortgage rates pivot off the 10-year bond, and the market itself determines where the 10-year bond is going to be, not the Fed. And long-term rates went up because their interpretation of this Fed rate cut is that, well, this is inflationary. Yields are going to have to rise. So the 10-year goes up, longer-term bonds go up. So I don't think that this is going to result in lower mortgage rates. It may have the opposite effect. Quite frankly, it doesn't make sense that he would reduce rates at all. The economy is so good, keep rates where they are. You know, you can't tell me that the Fed isn't political, because this seems like a political decision. The only other thing I can see is that maybe the Fed knows something. Maybe the Fed knows that the economy really isn't as good as I'm telling you. And we don't have a meeting in October, so I'm going to try to get ahead of the curve here. It's a possibility, but I still think it's a political decision. So with that said, you have a good week. Thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you next Saturday.